Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is the podcast where we talk about how to escape your borders, whether it involves starting a location-independent business, living internationally, finding more self-reliance, using technology and networks in order to help yourself. My name is Jonathan Lockwood. I'm here with James Guzman.
How's it going, Jonathan? You feeling all right today?
I'm feeling great today. Thank you.
Good.
I'm getting ready for my trip to LA. I'm going to go see my daughter and also spend some time with my girlfriend, Cecilia, in San Diego. I'm looking forward to it. Mm-hmm. Well, we're coming to you from San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. And we've appreciated all of the listeners recently and the participation we've been having in our private Facebook page and stuff. Our guest today is John Cobin. John is an economics professor, author, and expert on the nation of Chile. Dr. John Cobin of Escape America Now is host of the Red Hot Chile radio program and an expert on Chile, especially from an expat perspective. Combined with his experience as an economics scholar and professor, John's many years in Chile provides insights into the great opportunities the country offers Westerners. He's a real expat, having gone through the challenges personally and helping many others through the years. He's written many books, 3 of which have to do with Chile: Life in Chile, a former American's guide for newcomers; Expatriates to Chile, Topics for Living, and his most recent edition, Living in Chile, Key Details of History, Culture, Politics, and Places for the Serious Immigrant. Welcome, John Cobin.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So, John, at what point where are you from originally?
Well, I was born in California. I've lived in Oregon 8 years, Hawaii a little bit, South Carolina 7 years, Michigan a couple of years, Virginia and West Virginia a few years for grad school. So I've been around all up in the United States, and I've been a traveler to many places. 70 countries is my current tally. I've been in every state in the U.S. except Alaska, and every city in Chile that has at least 500 people, and probably every city that has at least 300 people, if I can call it a city or town, except for the island town of Isla Juan Fernandez. So I get around a bit, so where I'm from is sort of everywhere, but originally born in California.
Just can't sit still, can you, John?
I just keep moving around. This last year I've been sort of sitting still more than not. I spend a lot of time in Italy, and I haven't been there much in the last year, and just been really content to stay in Chile the last year for the most part, year and a half. So,
John, your background is in economics. That's what you have a PhD, is that correct?
Well, a PhD is actually in public policy. My dissertation is on an economics topic, and it was on building regulation, market alternatives, and allodial policy. So it's very much an economics dissertation. If you know my chairman, Walter Williams, or one of my committee members, Walter Williams, and then some of the others you may not know. But I was in a public policy program, not in the pure economics program. I did do my master's there in economics, and I have another master's in business economics from UC Santa Barbara. And I have some undergrad education in economics and also theology.
Wow. So did you have a chance to study under Walter Williams, any of his classes?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he was on
awesome.
my committee member. I took my first year micro with him.
That's great.
And the economics program. Yeah, before I started in the economics program at George Mason, and then when public policy opened up the Austrian economics track, I decided to branch off into that, but I kept him anyway on the dissertation committee.
Very good. Love Walter Williams. So, John, your dissertation had to do with economics. What about your education? There came a time when you decided you wanted to leave the United States. What led to that? Can you share that with us?
Well, it all started, I think, with Bill Clinton. And, I was sort of a guy who was really rah-rah in my 20s and stuff with Ronald Reagan, thinking, yes, this is the guy. And looking back upon it now, he was certainly the better of all the evils that followed him. But there were a lot of things that he left, a lot of the things that really weren't right from a libertarian point of view. And so I became a little disenchanted with politics, you could say, in the U.S. And even though later on I even tried to run as a libertarian, I realize now that it was just a waste of time trying to even come close to saving America. So Bill Clinton And the undermining of property rights that happened in the Supreme Court with the spotted owl case in Oregon made me realize that if property rights end, the United States is going to end, so I need to find a new country. And ever since then, whether we went to Bush, who was worse than Clinton, and now Obama, who makes Clinton look like an angel, I'm thinking, man, this is just a bad situation. So the political climate was bad. The social climate was bad. And although Chile leaves a lot to be desired, where I live now, it's much better than the United States in every way, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. And how long ago was it that struck you really hard and you decided to leave?
I left in '96, March of '96. I've been here just over 19 years, although I did go back to South Carolina for about 7 years and a little bit in California in there. So in overall 12, 13 years that I've been here. And when I went back, it was always underscored to me, even during that period of the early 2000s, that this is not the place to be. It's gotten worse since I left.
What about Chile then? Why did you choose Chile at that time?
Well, Chile, I actually did a lot of research on different countries, came up with countries like Argentina on the list in the 90s, Czech Republic, Estonia, and New Zealand. And New Zealand and Chile were at the top of my list just from what I could read and research and using weighted averages for variables I thought were important. And when I got here, everything worked out exactly as I had thought. Chicago boys had a great influence, which means that free market economics took hold and the country really started to go off. And really has done very well until even the recent problem where we have with the socialist president stagnating things and raising taxes slightly, notwithstanding. So that was a big deal. The other was the kind of language that they speak here, which is Spanish rather than Estonian, for instance. Another was the beautiful country that it is. It's the most beautiful country in the world of anyone I've seen. I've seen some staggeringly beautiful places like the South Island of New Zealand, Central Europe, even the Himalayas. And this is for me the most beautiful country in the world. It's just incredibly it's an incredible thing. Gringos are welcome here. You know, those are from the United States, and that's not true in most of Latin America. And there's a hope, there's a future here that I think for people that are socially conservative or traditional like me can feel comfortable in a country like this, and yet still have an opportunity to live and do business and pay low taxes and relatively regulation free. Gun rights aren't as good as the U.S. used to be, at least, but still are pretty good, way better than Hong Kong or New Zealand, at least. And the list goes on. And there are negative things here, which I can also comment on if you'd like, but the positive things are vastly outweighing the negative things in Europe or the United States.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that because there are obviously some negative things. Anybody thinking that there's a Shangri-La out there will have a rude awakening. Even if there were one for 5 minutes, it would soon not be one. But for all of the negative things that we can talk about Chile, there are some very special things about it, like you say, economically, that places it well above many countries and certainly above all of the countries in Latin America, or at least that's been the case for the last few years. I don't want to get deeply into this, but I would like your insight as to how did that happen? The Chicago boys, as you say, the people under Milton Friedman had some sort of influence on this, correct?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, the Chicago boys really, they were taught by Milton Friedman, the early ones, and by Harburger. I was at the University of Chicago, later went to UCLA. But they came here and basically installed a free market system. It's not an Austrian economic system. Certainly, they're cousins of Austrian or public choice economics in many respects, but they privatized Social Security. They put the inflation under control by creating an offset currency called the UF, the Unidad de Fomento. So Chile is effectively inflation-free for those who either hold debt or hold assets. Your salary gets adjusted every year, and the inflation bite goes away. Property taxes and other taxation is very low, and even income taxes. And when you do have tax return, you don't have tax returns. When you do have tax filings and so forth, they're extremely simple and usually optional, because what's held there for you can just keep, and you don't have to try to reclaim any of it if you don't want. And a lot of people opt for that. Another nice thing about Chile that really helps the situation, it's not politically correct. I mean, I can tell you some stories just make your hair stand on end if you're an American or European, just going back to the way things were 50 years ago, which I just love. And so, not having the burdens of police violence and brutality and thuggery and starting wars with other nations and not being politically correct is just a huge benefit. But the Chicago boys, came down here and installed the economic policies, free trade, tariff went down to 6% for every new good, 9% for used goods coming in. Still some flaws in it. Still have some issues with, oil company that's owned by the government, a big copper mine that's owned by the government that never got privatized. So there's still more work to be done, but far light years ahead of what the United States and certainly Europe are like.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I realize how you feel about what happened there. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that have maybe left-wing people that have negative feelings about that. Do you find a lot of people like that down there, or what do they usually? What's their opinions on that time period?
Well, like every country in the world, most people in this country are ignorant and just don't have a clue in anything. And whatever sounds good, they follow the flow. They're like parrots, and they repeat what somebody told them, and they'll vote with the mainstream. And so I'd say most people tend to be the left in that sense, that they follow these demagogues and these leftist mouthpieces that are around. And we have a contingent of pretty hardcore communists in the country that really make a lot of squawk. And they fell so flat on their face here recently with this botched bomb attempt and the metro, and that got just incredible, backlash against them because it was all set off by Marxists. Followers of, some kind of Maoist group, I think, Marx at any rate. Your economic policies actually totally bring the country to a halt. We were down at 5% unemployment. That's about gonna double here, at least in some of the regional areas, because of the people have stopped investing in Chile in a large measure, like they were before this president. So people can see the light, what happens. It comes to light what happens to when these communist policies are put in. So there are a lot of them around. You hear about them, you see them, they write their graffiti. But, on balance, there are also a large number of libertarian or right-wing, economically right-wing people here that tend to balance it off. And also the middle class here is quite large. I mean, it's by accounts in Chile, it's 84% of the people, which is enormous for Latin America. I don't think it's that large. I think it's 60 something. And that means they have some buying power beyond their basic needs. So when you have a middle class, it's pretty strong. The, communist appeal goes away, and people realize that life's a lot better now than it was, 40 years ago when Chile was the poorest country in Latin America.
Yeah. So, as far as the communists, I'm sure they don't have a whole lot of influence on the economy. But I mean, like you mentioned before, I've heard about this new, the socialist president. I mean, are there any types of policies that you think are going to have a lasting effect, or are there anything that people are doing to kind of counteract that, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. We were very fearful when she got elected because she had this coalition that include communists, and the communists have 6 of the 120 seats in Congress here. So, I mean, they get 5% or whatever 4% of the votes there, and it's more than I'd like to see because they're pretty hardcore. But anyway, when they all got together there in the cabinet, or whatever you want to call it, the meeting of the minds came through, and the party went through, and the push went through, and they got elected in their coalition. Well, with all that going on, people were starting to worry what's going to happen to us. And sure enough, since then, there have been some radical changes that they put through into the Constitution for education. They're going to try to make it free, which means it's going to be debased and put a lot of private companies out of business. They've raised taxes on certain things. And so we're feeling the pressure from them a bit, and that we don't like. But the pushback has been so hard because she's damaged the economy so bad that her approval rating went from 70% to down into the 30s. And a couple of weeks ago, she just fired everybody in her cabinet and installed a brand new cabinet, trying to save face and trying to get some new blood and get people believing again. Hasn't been working so far, and the word on the street is that she's not only not going to get elected, her coalition's done. People are through with it after the disaster that this has caused here. So that's the upside of all that. So in the future, we're looking at in a couple more years, we'll get through this and then be able to make the changes and go back as people get elected from the right, economically speaking.
Going through some renovations there, John?
Yeah. You could probably hear a little bit of construction going on around me here.
Very good. Well, you're building. That's good. We're talking with John Cobin of Escape America Now on the Borderless podcast. He's host of the Red Hot Chile radio program. And he was just talking earlier about how Chile as a country tends not to be very politically correct at all. And that was something that was explained to me too. I spent a few weeks there in January, February of 2013, and I found all sorts of really cool people, all these young Americans and not just Americans, people from all over the world. Some of them were a little bit older, and that was what they shared with me. There was an older gentleman there who said, to me, Chile reminds me of America 1950s. If somebody builds a business and is successful, people don't say, hey, who did you kill in order to become successful? They seem to be welcoming, as you said, to Americans and to building businesses and generally have respect for people who build. Does that sound right to you?
I think that's true. There's a lot of people who can't build business, but if you come here as an American with some capital and you invest, they're very happy to see it happen. They're not opposed, except for some of these hardcore socialists that'll try to close down businesses so they're not owned by Chileans. There are some like that, and there have been some success in it. Kika recently and elsewhere, it's really sad. They put a German plant out of business and lost 2,000 jobs because of some stupid policy. But that's normally not the case in Chile. Normally speaking, it's wide open for investment, and they encourage it. And as I said, as soon as the current administration is ousted, they'll and some people don't think she'll make it through a term. They'll all return. The politically correct thing is so funny here. When I remember years ago seeing an ad for a secretary in the newspaper. It just cracks you up when you come from an American context. Wanted bilingual secretary, must be obviously a female with between 25 and 28 years old, with a good figure and long hair. Pretty. So
long
these
hair?
kind of things. Yeah, right. They want to make sure she's attractive, for when people come in the door, the first thing they see is this pretty girl. And, they don't, that people don't have a problem with. What's the problem with that? How can Americans be opposed to that? And it's kind of a shock for us. I remember one time, my dean before I was married here, and about 5 years ago, he was trying to get me to stay when I was at a certain faculty here in Santiago. So he wanted to get me hooked up with a gal. And so we'd be walking around and he'd just be asking questions about, what do you think about the merchandise in this area? I'm like, what merchandise are you talking about? No, I'm talking about the girls in the area. Do you like this one or that one, color hair? And, oh, okay. It was my dean talking to me about girlfriends. And it was on lunch, but then we got back for a committee meeting. There's a mixed audience, directors might be 6 or 8 people there. And he'll say something just off the wall, like, well, John, when you're looking at a girl, do you like, big boobs or small boobs? And I'm like, huh? Did you just say that to me in the middle of all these people? and the weird thing is the whole room there, the girls, the ladies in the room didn't even bat an eye. I was just like, oh yeah, that's a normal question you'd want to ask somebody. Of course, that didn't bother them a bit. And there's even more stuff than you can imagine. It's really quite amazing here when you don't have a politically correct society. And I love it. I have to say, I hate political correctness. That push on you when you're in the United States and in Europe is just so awful. And here it's a breath of fresh air that you can be free and people can say what they want without feeling they're going to have repercussions.
Right. So I've been trying to spotlight some of the positive things that you have to say about Chile, but nobody could accuse John Cobin of wearing rose-colored glasses. You've mentioned a lot of things to us about the negative things that can be observed there. And I think that really emphasizes something. For me, it was 3-4 years ago, something like that. I just really began to see some of the changes happening in the United States. I mean, sure, they've been happening forever, but I really began to experience what seemed to me like an Atlas Shrugged world. And so I began looking for another place to go. I wonder, is there a Gulch somewhere? And I began looking at Doug Casey's project there in Argentina. And I found out about Chile, and I decided to go check it out. And the thing that has been emphasized to me as I reflect on it, and I consider the way I was thinking, is this belief that you need to go find a group of ideologically congruent people or something like that. That sounds nice, and that's great. And some people are going to have some successes with that, but they don't always work out, and they are unnecessary. We do not have to look for Shangri-La. Ultimately, what we're looking for is the best place for now, and, in the event of a flood, moving to higher ground.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, and certainly would normally be true. The idea of having a Freedom Orchard or a Gulch was to get enough like-minded people together that we could actually have a stronger influence in a place that's already open to being influenced by libertarian ideas. So you have a lot of people come in who've got businesses, they draw capital in, and actually start influencing politics to the point that we might even get another representative or congressman elected or senator, and start impacting politics, also impacting just the way the work ethic is, and making a good stand somewhere for libertarians. If there's a bunch of libertarian minds together too, there are also business opportunities that might come to pass that wouldn't happen if we were just scattered around. So those are the pluses of having it, but it really requires a place like Chile to thrive. So, or it could be a Hong Kong also, but Hong Kong's so expensive. So here you've got an opportunity that really was the fertile soil for doing it. You wouldn't want to even try to do this in Mexico. I mean, Doug Casey really fell off the wagon trying to put it in Argentina. That is so different than Chile. It's a basket case country in many respects, and anti-libertarian. And so that was not a good idea for him to do that over there at all. Do you want me to talk about negative things about Chile?
I think we have, but go ahead.
Well, I think I'd like to go into more of, what are some of the examples of, I know that you had Freedom Orchard, and then obviously we had GGC, which we covered, and then I think Simon Black had something. So are you still continuing with the Freedom Orchard?
I'm not. I've had to pull back from that. I'd like to go back into it later, but right now Frank Szabo is actually running as much as we can of what's left of Freedom Orchard.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I would love to continue with it, but I'm in general, I'm now a head of a construction company here in Chile, a fledgling construction company that's doing fairly well. And a professor. Those are the two things I do. And so I'm not a person that's ever had capital to put in. I've had the ideas, and I've got the resources around here to get people to do the work, which people like Ken Johnson or Simon Black and others, Simon's, not to put them in the same drawer by mentioning the same breath. I mean, Simon Black's a great guy and totally different than Ken Johnson or Jeff Berwick even. But, they came to the country and did not realize how difficult it is to do business here if you're not acclimated, if you don't have the right contacts. And that's what I facilitate. I can do all that sort of stuff for people. Right. What are we going to do in the future here? I don't know. I hope something comes out of it. I really do. Yeah. And we can end up having a Freedom Orchard.
We're talking with John Cobin, economics professor, author, and expert on the nation of Chile. You can find him at Escape America Now. We're going to take just a moment and thank our sponsor, and then we'll get back to John. Today's Borderless podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group, your online leader in promoting an unjustified positive self-image. This week, our friends at the Condescending Group posted their manifesto, Fight for 50. This is their effort to one-up everyone else who is promoting a $15 minimum wage and instead push for $50 an hour. You'll see the Fight for 50 YouTube video they posted, which has one of the Condescending Group's correspondents showing up at a fast food restaurant to stand in solidarity with fast food workers. Unfortunately, the correspondent, while sympathizing with the employee, discovered something that horrified him. Namely, that most of these fast food places actually don't serve 100% plant-based food. So as you might imagine, it was an uncomfortable moment as he wanted to support this drive to make burger flippers and teenage countergirls wealthy, but at the same time being shocked and physically repulsed at a local patron eating his half-pound heifer burger. He immediately confronted the man, asking him what his mother had done to make him want to be so unkind to fellow mammals. Contradictions and moral inconsistencies, unfortunately, they seem to follow our Condescending Group friends everywhere they go. But as they always say, even if your zeal is ignorant and misplaced, as long as your heart is in the right place, you can rest assured you are morally superior. The Condescending Group, they care more than you. You're listening to the Borderless Podcast. Our guest today, John Cobin, economics professor, author, and expert on Chile. Escape America Now. And John escaped quite some time ago. He originally went to Chile in the mid-90s and then later went back in the early 2000s. At that time, John, our question for you, what did you do? Like you said, it's not like you were a rich man. You didn't have a lot of capital to invest. So what were you doing to support yourself?
I've been an economics professor in Chile for over 10 years. And now I actually took a break after I was through the latest socialist president and some other things. Laid off, and I won't be back starting at the university here in Chile till August this year, but it'll just be very part-time. I'm still working on my business here, the construction business, and some consulting. As I do residency consulting, still real estate consulting, and others for people that are coming down, usually wealthier individuals that need help. So I've always supported myself as an economics professor primarily, and then done other things, consulting on the side.
All right, very good. And so where do you teach? Where is it?
The university I will be teaching it at now is called Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez, and I also supervise dissertations at Swiss Management Center in. It says it's in Zug, Switzerland, but in actuality, it's really run out of Ohio. They do kind of like I don't want to say online because that's not quite right, but I supervise research long distance, and we use the internet a lot for what's necessary to get the pages read and improved and get the books the theses through. So I do that also.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing about kind of the difference in the cost of living there. Can you compare that to maybe some of the places that you lived in the United States? You're in Santiago right now. Maybe that compared to where you were in South Carolina, perhaps?
No, I'm not in Santiago. I live in Viña del Mar, which is
okay.
Yeah, I lived in Santiago for a long time though. Before that, and almost it's been more than 10 years I lived there, I guess. But Santiago on the Mercer scale, if you read their research report, I think it was 73rd most expensive in the world on a list of 200 cities. That's probably about right. The cost of living in Santiago is much cheaper than most major cities. Rent especially is cheaper. Cars are about the same price. Gas is a little bit higher than the United States, a little bit lower than Europe, somewhere kind of in the middle. Diesel's considerably lower than gas here. Cost of living for groceries, well, it depends. Vegetables and fruits are dirt cheap, literally. I mean, it might be 5-10 times cheaper than the United States and more than Europe. But meat is the same or a little bit more, and I'd say cheese about the same, milk about the same. So even after you've been here a while, because there aren't any coupons, and if you're a good shopper and use the different cards that are available for those kinds of things, you're going to end up paying at best 10% less than the United States and maybe 30% less than Europe. As far as utilities go, I find them very comparable. Your internet connection with service like a phone added to it might be, $55 a month. If you get a good cell phone plan managed well, you might be another $50 a month. If you got water bill, it might be $15, $20 a month. Gas, about the same. And your electricity, depending on what you use, might be, maybe $40, $45 a month, something like that, typically. So for cost of living, that stuff's lower. Insurance all across the board is slightly less, not much less. Private schools are vastly less than in the U.S. for decent quality. I don't know about Europe. I think it's also expensive there. Going skiing is cheaper here. And I think the biggest difference for household budgets tend to be the much lower taxes that you pay here and the lower rent. You can buy a home here in Viña del Mar. I can build you one. Or we can find you one for probably, I'm talking about a decent home, but maybe 1,200 square feet, well optimized, might be $200,000 with a beautiful view in an upper class neighborhood. Of course, you want twice as much room. You can figure it's going to be 50 or 60% more than that price. But that same thing, if it were in Santa Barbara or La Jolla, it's going to be millions of dollars because of the view in the neighborhood, not to mention the quality of the building.
I'm glad you brought that up, John. I was going to say, I loved Viña del Mar. To me, central Chile there reminded me a lot of southern or central California. You had the vineyards right in there. And I remember taking a look and saying, when people realize this is basically California, there's going to be a big push for people to want to come there. And like you say, you're not going to get anything like that in California for the money. Viña del Mar, I remember thinking of it as like a little mini San Diego or something.
Yeah, that's right. The weather here is more like Santa Barbara because it's more fog and marine layer than San Diego gets. In my view, it's not much different. I mean, San Diego to Santa Barbara is not that much different. But I remember in Santa Barbara when I lived there, the rain seemed to be harder and you seemed to get a little bit damper chill, and Viña's like that than you did a little further south in Southern Cal. But it's all very similar. The climate's almost identical as far as I can tell to Southern California here.
I was just reading your website, which of course is Escape America Now, and you have a blog post on there, and it brings up this question because we take a look at governments, we take a look at the environment, and one of the things you have to do is take a look at the differences in social interactions, just the way, the culture itself. And certainly, I moved here to San Miguel de Allende in Mexico a year ago, and I've run into certain things. You just cannot expect the things that come out of people's mouths to be real. And so this, you wrote this on April 19th. Can you trust a Chilean's information or judgment? No one could accuse you of being a punch puller. I thought you were kind of joking up top, but it appears not. You say, everyone here knows that most Chileans blame shift, lie, and cheat to get ahead, and that the great majority of educational institutions, from public schools to evangelical seminaries to science programs in private universities, have low academic standards and produce ignorant and mediocre graduates. You're not joking there, are you?
No. And when you live here, it's more in your face than that. I mean, it's one of the hardest things you have to come to grips with if you're going to live down here is the quality of people. And this is a society that's built upon lying and cheating and mistrust. Everything from marital mistrust and adultery to, how can they pickpocket you or steal from you or cheat in the classroom if you're a student. They will strive to be mediocre. I mean, it's an amazing thing. They'll go out of their way to be the C student. And the grades here are 1 to 7, for instance, and a 4 is a pass. And you can almost see them saying, wow, you got a 4.1, you worked too hard. You got a 4.3, wow, what's wrong with you? You could have done just the C work, the average work, and still got your degree. I mean, to find a student that really wants to do well or to find a worker that really wants to excel is literally 1 in 1,000 here. And once you find them, you've got to hold on to them tightly. Having said that, I've had brilliant doctors. I mean, some of the people that study medicine are just absolutely the most brilliant Chileans. Like in any culture, they got just very, very bright people here. A mix of mass of people that are really stupid and ignorant, frankly. The U.S. and Europe are no different in that sense. But when you get one of those, like the doctor, the medical care here I've had 3 surgeries, and it has just been so astoundingly good that I can't praise it enough. But on the other hand, when I'm dealing with common folks, I mean, forget it. They don't know. They're ignorant. They do mediocre work. If I've got construction workers, I've got to fire half of them, every once in a while because they get lazy and they don't do their work right. And I know they're better here than almost anywhere else in Latin America. The Chilean productivity is high, so I can only imagine what it's like in Mexico. But still, they're bad here compared to American or European standards on mediocrity. Now, you can find them again. You have to handpick them through. You have to pay them a little more once you've got a good one. You treat them well, and you can keep a good crew in your business. But getting there is not going to be easy. And when you're in society asking questions, you can't trust people. I don't care how important the lawyer is or where he says he studied. Oh, lawyers are some of the most ignorant people I've met in Chile. I mean, literally, some of the worst are lawyers. And Americans come down here, hire a bilingual lawyer thinking that's going to be it. They're going to have somebody they can trust and help them. He's ignorant, and he's probably going to get him in all sorts of trouble. And that's the rule rather than the exception. It's going to be exceptional if you can find a good lawyer that you can trust, that you can count on to do stuff. So that's the reality here. And if you come down with any other thought in mind, or I'm going to do it myself, or I'm going to trust this guy, you're just going to be landing on your face flat pretty soon and have a problem.
Well, yeah, that sounds pretty intimidating. If someone was going to come down there and maybe they had a piece of property or something they were interested in buying, or if even a lawyer, you can't trust their opinion, what would you suggest that somebody do?
Hire me.
Okay.
It's not just a plug for me. I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many people have come down. Oh, I'm not going to pay Cobin $1,000 a day. You know how many thousands it costs them when they finally get screwed and all that? It's a lot more. And even from little things like buying or renting an apartment, with the gringo price, they'll pay double. And they would recuperate the amount of money that they spent on me in just a few months. But buying a piece of land, it's like with Ken Johnson. Thought he was so great when Geraldo goes to Chile. The guy's such a fraudster. He negotiated that land with Ramirez for what was it, $6 million. My partner Herman had already before that time negotiated a $3 million price with him. And because we get a different price. I don't know if you speak Spanish like Johnson didn't, but if you don't have an accent like I do, you can even do better. And so with my team, I get the right people together. We get, we ask for the right price. We ask for the right details we want, and save the person coming down just buku dollars. That if you think you can come down and do it yourself, you're going to do it yourself, but do it very expensively, and probably get shafted along the way with some bad things happening. As people time and time do. So It's sometimes in a new country setting, it pays to pay for information and get the connections right off the bat, rather than trying to, save a nickel or pinch a penny and end up, wasting dollars and dollars.
I mean, this is my way, John. I don't know how people do it any other way. I look for experts in almost every area of my life just because I've made a lot of mistakes over time, and it really does pay off. And so we got the right guy for Chile here, because we're looking with the Borderless Network to be able to find the people, the go-to people who can push people in the right directions. Either you can hire them or they can give you information that sets you off on the right foot. And so we're glad we were able to find you here. Chile has been registering on the, what do they call it? The index? Who is it? The Economic Freedom Index, right? Where do they sit now, according to that index, John? And do you respect that index?
I respect both of them, the Fraser Institute one and the Heritage one, as well as Transparency International and some of the other ones, but especially those first two. To be honest with you, I haven't checked out if the latest one from Heritage came out yet, but Heritage dropped Chile down to 11th, as I recall, and Fraser still has Chile at 7th, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't looked at them in a couple of months here. So it's the highest ranking Latin American country, and it's been even higher than that beforehand. And it should be higher than Australia and Canada. I have no idea why those are on there, except somebody wants to make those two countries feel good, because Chile is a freer country than both of them in most respects. I agree that Switzerland and New Zealand should be on the list, and of course Hong Kong and Singapore. So the list is actually pretty accurate, but Chile is just right up there. I was going to say, based on the last comment, the last guy I helped, and Simon Black said the same thing about me when I helped him with his property. Just said was the best value of anybody you could find in Chile. This last guy I helped was surrounded with 4 or 5 different lawyers, brokers, other things, and he told a friend of mine who called me. He said, John was the only guy that did his job and did it well. Everyone else here just let me down in one way or another. Every other Chilean I employed, and unfortunately, that's going to be what you run into here. No matter what you think, you're going to have problems here in business. Doesn't mean you won't succeed. It's just going to be inefficient, and you're going to end up having a lot of frustrations coming down, being used to work in Europe or the U.S.
Yeah, when I was there, one of the things that I respected is that there apparently was a provision passed by the Chilean government that you could incorporate a business within 24 hours online, correct?
Yeah, that's true. It's not every kind of corporation, but there are certain numbers of corporations you can do that way, types, and I think they're putting more up that way as well.
All right. Well, I'm curious to know what you think is the type of person that would enjoy Chile. Would a young person that wants to start a business, or maybe they have their own business, would they enjoy it there? I'm sure there's some cities that they would and then they wouldn't. Or somebody that maybe just wants to retire. Or what are some examples of cities maybe that would be good for these types of people, and maybe there's some people that it just wouldn't be good for?
Well, this is sort of an interesting question, and a lot of people that come down, I guess, that I meet give me some perspective on this. There's something in Chile for about everybody. It's true, but younger people, I think, would tend to like Santiago, northeastern Santiago, or Viña del Mar better than anywhere else in the country. A lot of things are happening there. But if you're a party kind of person, you like really fancy discos or the big party scene, which I'm not part of. But when I understand people come down, they get disappointed because it's not like Europe or the U.S. or even Central America. It's far more traditional here. And I've had people who say they leave because the girls aren't as friendly here or open as they are in other places. I don't know, again, but I would say that if you're a person who likes to have a more traditional valued family, this is a better place to come. So people who are going to like that, more conservative family values will like this place. And the smaller the community in Chile, the better as far as that goes. For people who want to start businesses in a freer environment with low taxes and have just a place to land where property rights are strong, have the security for their family, the low crime on the violent crime index, a lot of pickpocketing, but not low crime on the violent crime. This is a place, and then you can branch out and do your business elsewhere. So anybody who's a businessman, however old they are, this would be a good choice for people. And obviously, if you want to retire, you've got your pick of climates here and scenery that's unparalleled anywhere in the world. I got one client who lives up in Iquique, loves it up there. The desert never rains, literally. And it's just, there's some fog that rolls in. Otherwise, it's a blue sky almost every day, as long as you can handle the tropical sun. It's not hot and like tropical like Cartagena would be or Panama City, but it's still, it's intense. Or if you like the trees and mountain scenery around lakes and, pristine volcano peaks and, snow-capped, all that's available too. And some people come and live in two places. It's so cheap in these outlying areas. You can, put 100,000 in one home and 150 in another and live 6 months in one and 6 months in the other. So for retirees, this is the cat's meow. There can't be a better place. Like we talked about Viña del Mar. It's just it's a medium-sized city. It's about the size as Panama City and 2 hours from Santiago, and yet has the Southern California climate for, a 20th or 10th at least of the price. That's pretty attractive.
I just had a memory when you mentioned Viña del Mar. When I first went there, again, I was enjoying it. It seemed very friendly, very safe, very nice. And I was looking around and I saw something that reminded me a bit of home. It was a Mexican restaurant called Margaritas. Mm-hmm. And I went in there thinking I would get some good Mexican food, and I didn't. What I noticed is every single Mexican food, whether it was enchiladas, burrito, whatever, they were all flour tortillas with virtually the same elements wrapped up with a cream sauce on top. I have a video of this. Everything just looked the same, but it was the best ceviche I've ever had in my life, bar none. And that really is the difference. I think most Americans who haven't traveled a lot have this idea that, South America, the food is all relatively similar, and it isn't. What is the primary diet of people in Chile, would you say?
Well, that's a great question, and it's more European. In fact, Mexican food is not liked at all by Chileans. It's very hard to get them used to it. I had to teach my wife, who's Chilean, how to make a burrito. I mean, she had never seen it before. Literally, they just don't eat stuff. Refried beans for them are just like, what? Why would you eat that? To get them on the shelf you can, but it's expensive. You're paying almost $4 or $5 for a little can because it's imported and there's just not much demand for it. It's not that they can't afford it; they just don't like it. Same thing with peanut butter. Hardly anybody here eats that either. But at any rate, yeah. So you found Margaritas, and there's a branch in Reñaca, one in Viña, there's one in Santiago. But Mexican restaurants don't usually last long, and I find in general the quality is nothing compared to what it was in Southern Cal or even in Texas. So Mexican food would be, I'd say, one of the worst restaurants you can actually. And the fact that Margarita was good, it's great because I go there too sometimes.
Well, the ceviche was good, not the Mexican food.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's my opinion too. I mean, I was raised in Southern Cal, so I know what Mexican food's like. The Chileans do not like it. In fact, from what I understand, they're offended that Mexicans use the name of their country for hot, something hot like a chili.
Right.
They do not like that. So they call their traffic jams here tacos to retaliate a little bit. They're not pleased. But the Chilean diet is very much like either France or Italy or England. They like a lot of boiled potatoes. They'll do their meat, roast beef, or other kinds of things, just like you see on the European continent. Like lots of vegetables, and plates that are very similar to what, I don't know what I can say. It's just a European or maybe a French type of a situation. A lot of seafood too, especially out on the coast, more than almost like Portugal or, Spain, some of those areas that have a lot of seafood production, Italy maybe. Restaurants are wonderful in Chile in general, especially in Santiago or this part of the Viña. All through the country, you can always find wherever you are a great restaurant. It's hard to have a bad meal as long as you go to a good restaurant in this country.
On the last day I was there, I went to a great little seafood place upstairs from the Mercado Central, and it was some of the best seafood I've ever had. One of the other things I noticed when I was in Chile, every restaurant I went to, they would bring you a nice big bowl of mayonnaise. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, that's different. And one time I ordered something and the waiter said, mayonnaise? And I said, no gracias. And they said, no mayonnaise? So apparently mayonnaise is very big there.
Yeah, in fact, and they like dipping their French fries in it, and they can't understand why anybody would put ketchup on French fries. It's just a different cultural thing. And we don't understand why you want to dip your fat-soaked fries in more fat, but that's what they like. So
I'm getting very hungry all of a sudden for some reason.
Damn hungry.
Half the man.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. So let's go over some of your services that you have down there. Maybe give out some of your websites that you have. I know that you help people set up residency, correct?
Yeah, we have a long-standing residency program that's been operating about 5 years now. That we've helped, well over 100 people on a very boutique sort of basis. Most of the people we help are wealthy people. It's not entirely true. I'd say 80% of them are that come down. And what we do is we handle everything. We pick you up at the airport. We take you to the hotel if you don't already have one booked, or even if you do, we'll take you there. We get you all your documents before you come. We don't actually order the document. We tell you what you need to do, and you take care of getting the documents before you come. And we take the documents, get them processed here, and in one day, maybe two at the most, get you applied for your visa, your temporary visa as a retiree. Normally, you need to have at least 100,000 in assets. Typically. Usually we try to have statements that we can show the Chilean government of $250,000 in any country you want. And after we get that visa, you basically apply and come back in anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months, sometimes longer, depending on how long the bureaucrats take with your application. We get you your visa, you come down, stay the required 185 days in the country after the date of the visa. And then we put you through the permanent residency process. So we do all that hand-holding for about a year and a half with you. Base price is $29.95, and dependents are $500 or $250, depending on their age. There could be other services there too. We also have consulting services to help you get your container here, to get gold here, to get your guns registered here, to get your pets here, to find an apartment, and a bunch of other things that we also help you with. EscapeAmericaNow.info is where you can find those services. I also have the other side of the services that people really like are the real estate, helping you find a farm, or giving you consulting so you can help know what to plant in your particular area you like to settle in, or where your farm is, and you may settle in some other area. So finding either a small farm or a large farm, like the one you mentioned, Simon Black's, which is 1,000-something acres. This recent one I did was just smaller, like a 6-hectare farm, about 15 acres. So anything between those two is easy for me to do, and I handle that for you. And we have other kinds of consulting services for setting up a business, for instance, or helping even find a job if necessary. Although it's a little pricey to do that if you're gonna use my services at $1,000 a day. I have some other people that work with us that have an hourly rate that's cheaper for different kinds of services. But if you really need some expertise in getting things done fast, you really should go directly through me or through one of my senior staff members. A guy just showed up recently, I think 2 weeks ago, for instance, in Reñaca here, and we got him his medical insurance, which is an ordeal. It's not what you think it is, like in the U.S. And we got him an apartment and settled in with his residency. The residency, he paid one fee for it, paid $1,000 for one day, and we got everything else done for him. He's moved in, containers on the way, and he's got the medical insurance he wants. So we can do it all pretty quickly for you and save you some money along the way. So escapeamericanow.info is where you go. There's another website, chile-consulting.cl, that has the same information. Either one of those will work for our services.
Well, no place is perfect, but among the options for expatriation, Chile is definitely a major contender, and John Cobin is our guy in Chile. He's been there, he's done it, he's helped many other people do it, and he's a great resource if you're looking to check out Chile.
All right, John. Well, kind of to wrap up this interview, I'd like to ask you what we ask all the interviewees here, and that is if somebody is thinking about moving outside of their country, starting their own business, kind of living an international lifestyle like this, what's the best piece of advice that you would give them?
Go quickly, because I think right now you're going to have all sorts of problems where you are shortly. You need to make sure your assets are out of the country first. It's an easy thing to do. Don't wait till the last minute to do that. Don't come when it's ugly. Come when it's pretty. Some people think they go to Chile in the ugliest part of the year, it's going to be the best for them. It's not the wisest counsel. Get your money out first. Get your visa situation set up right away, and read all that you can before you leave. That's why I buy the 3 books with 1,200 pages in them. You can get them on the Escape America Now website, .info website. And you should read all those 1,200 pages if you're going to think about Chile. I mean, and if you have other countries you're considering, read all that you can about them, because you have no idea what a shock it's going to be changing cultures and how difficult some things are going to be. The more prepared you can be, the better.
All right. Very good. So we've been talking with John Cobin on the Borderless podcast. Thanks so much, John, for coming on.
You're welcome, and glad to be with you guys. Wish you well.
Well, we've been hearing good things about John Cobin for some time, and now we know why.
Yeah.
He had really great information for us. It was readily available. He sounds like a guy who really knows what he's talking about. Obviously, he's been there for many years, so he understands this stuff.
Yeah, and I think when we had Terrence Gillespie on, he said that he wrote 8,000 letters to the editor there or something. Yeah. So it's he's involved, and he's been there for a while, so he seems to know what's going on there on the ground. So.
It's a great perspective too. I don't really have it. I don't think you do either, but I respect it. It's the idea, for me, I'm just trying to live as free a life as possible. And the idea of being a part of a community, that sounds cool, but I find it unnecessary. And yet, the idea there is you've got a country with maybe with not as much political correctness. Maybe if some libertarian-minded people move down there, they can have some positive effect on it and all that. And I respect that. It's just not where I am personally,
Yeah, well, it sounds like, at least for now, there's nothing, well, other than I know that Fort Galt, that I don't think any of the other places are actually going forward, so...
Right. And, that's fine. I hope that does work out. I like those guys. I respect those guys, and I hope everything's very successful for them. Yeah. All I'm saying is it isn't necessarily necessary to have one of those ideologically consistent communities. But you know what? When I'm in Chile, I'll go see those guys.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to check it out. It could turn into something fantastic,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let me tell you what's going on with me. The stuff that I'm really intrigued by, and one of the reasons I like doing this podcast is you meet a lot of people who understand a lot of stuff that you don't understand. For instance, I've been trying to figure out a way to minimize my taxation as much as possible and do it legally above board and everything. And so I finally had a consultation with Mark Nestman,
right?
Who, among all of these offshore guys, there's a lot of interesting people. There really are not a lot of them that I'm aware of, maybe about 5. And he seems to be the one that most people believe is above board and most reliable.
Right.
And so I had my consultation with him, and I'm kind of excited about it. He's helped me understand just how you can have a foreign company and how that can profit you. And so he's suggested, the island of Nevis. Is it Nevis or Nevis?
Nevis.
I don't know.
St. Kitts and Nevis.
Okay, I think we'll call it Nevis. And he suggests a number of different jurisdictions in getting an LLC. And in that event, not only am I able to save a lot on taxes by means of, like everybody can, with the foreign resident income tax exemption, but I'm also able to not have to worry about paying payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare, things like that, because I will officially be an employee of this Nevis company of mine.
Yeah.
And so the services he provides is getting that all set up, and also making sure there's an employment contract so that this is all above board, and setting me up with a bank account. And he told me how all that works. And, I really respect Mark Nestman. I've been reading his stuff for quite a few years now. And again, he seems to be the one who always comes out, sometimes years ahead, warning about various things that may be a bit scammy, doesn't he?
That's right. Yeah. I think that's how he tries to kind of brand himself also as, the guy that sees all these different other nonsense going on. He's been the only one that has been talking against this Puerto Rico Act,
right?
Which I have somebody who is Puerto Rican has helped push that through, and he's agreed to come on the podcast, but I haven't gotten him yet. But I would like to hear his opinion on that, because I know that Nestman has been calling that out. So
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to be talking to some other experts. I've talked to some other people. I've got these things planned. So if anybody else has anybody who's very much in the know about how to do this, for instance, I have concerns about, well, how's this going to work? For instance, I can't, most of my clients are in the U.S. and I bill them and it goes into my U.S. account. But how do I get that money into my account in Nevis? Am I going to have to really, wire it? Are there some better ways to do this? Are there better banks, better jurisdictions than Nevis? So I am using this as my own little personal educational tool, this podcast. If you know anybody who understands the ins and outs of this better than I do, and that's not hard, probably half of you do, please let us know. We'd like to know about it. Go to borderlesspodcast.com. And when they go there, what happens, James?
Yeah, so when you go there, there's a large button, and it says, give me instant access, and they're going to get a free ebook, and then I'll also send them a link to the Facebook group. Lots of people there kind of interacting with each other from all over the world. And like Jonathan said, it's nice to have, if you have suggestions about, people that you think are knowledgeable in these types of areas that we should have on the podcast or we should add to the group, then, be happy to do that. Just send us a message or put something in the group there. And, we're going to be building this thing. I've been working a lot on getting this forum built on the website and a lot more information where some people that aren't on Facebook can also interact. Please join us there and continue to follow our podcasts.
Thanks for listening. Another Borderless podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.